Hello, everyone, and welcome to the One Ocean Conference. I'm very pleased to welcome you today for this high-level conference. My name is Benjamin Cabois, and I'm the Counsel for Culture, Education and Science at the Consulate General of France in Hong Kong. On behalf of the Consulate and the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, I thank you very much for joining us today. Hong Kong and France are two territories where oceans are of great importance. They provide us with essential resources, enable trade, and link us to the rest of the world. However, the health of our oceans is now threatened by numerous pressures, such as the effect of climate change, pollution, or the overexploitation of marine resources. Echoing the One Ocean Summit, an international event organized by France last February, our conference today will be the opportunity to discuss issues and solutions for ocean sustainability. Renowned ocean experts from both HKUST and from France will cover two major challenges: the preservation of marine life and blue finance. This conference will also be an opportunity to celebrate the strong cooperation relationship between HKUST and France. As a testimony to this, today we will renew our memorandum of understanding to foster our partnership and our common commitment to sustainability. Now it is a time for me to give the floor to the specialists. But first, we have the honor to listen to an introductory statement from Mr. Wong Kam-sing, Secretary for the Environment of the Hong Kong government.
I welcome the One Ocean Conference held in Hong Kong. The event is jointly organized by the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology and the Consulate General of France. This high-level conference brings together speakers from academia, business community, and civil society to discuss the future of our oceans. Hong Kong is a harbor city. We deeply appreciate the importance of the ocean. However, globally, the ocean is threatened by various pressures. For example, the effects of climate change, overfishing, and various forms of pollution, including the growing white pollution caused by plastics. Today, I share with you what we are doing to protect the marine environment. Firstly, investing in climate actions. In response to the Paris Agreement, Hong Kong has been working actively on climate actions. In 2020, Hong Kong made a pledge to achieve carbon neutrality before 2050. In 2021, we further updated Hong Kong's climate action plan, which included the announcement of first ever climate budget. In the next 15 to 20 years, the government will devote about Hong Kong dollars 240 billion, i.e. about 30 billion euros, to take forward various measures on climate mitigation and adaptation. Private enterprises are also expected to invest heavily in decarbonization. Meanwhile, the government will accelerate the development of green bonds and other green and sustainable financial products in Hong Kong. The first ever government retail green bond is a recent example. As an international financial center, Hong Kong has the capability and the inherent advantages to meet the enormous demand for financing by developing itself into a green hub in the region and serves as a premier financing platform for green enterprises, as well as green and blue projects in Hong Kong and the region. Second, conserving marine biodiversity. We published the Hong Kong Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan (BSAP) and will continue to conserve the terrestrial and marine habitats, which have remarkably rich biodiversity, with a view to conserving the invaluable local biodiversity, maintaining sustainable development, and promoting public awareness of nature conservation. We have taken various initiatives to protect Hong Kong's precious marine ecology. For instance, in 2021, we expanded the somewhat restricted area at Lemma Island and extended its restriction period for enhanced protection of green turtles. Throughout the years, we've also established 6 marine parks and 1 marine reserve to protect marine species and ecology, including the destination of the Brothers Marine Park and the Southwest Lantau Marine Park in 2016 and 2020 respectively. Moving forward, we will complete the destination of the proposed South Lantau Marine Park and North Lantau Marine Park in 2022 and 2024 respectively, which will double the total protected marine area in Hong Kong. Third, reducing single-use plastics. Last year, the government launched a series of public consultation and engagement on regulating various single-use plastics, including plastic beverage bottles, disposable plastic tablewares, plastic shopping bags, and other disposable plastic items, which collectively lay the foundation for us to formulate a comprehensive strategy to manage the white pollution at source. The government plans to trigger the relevant legislative processes starting this year. We also launched the Bye Bye Microbeads Charter, as some of the personal care and cosmetic products may contain plastic microbeads, which are intentionally added for scrubbing and cleansing purposes. The charter can help eliminate the potential risk of microbeads to the ocean and create and sustain a microbead-free culture in Hong Kong. Public education and publicity are also very important. For example, we stepped up the coastal cleanup activities. Volunteers are welcome to join. Through cleaning up shore lines, the public would be able to witness the threat of white pollution. Hopefully, they would change their lifestyle and go for reducing single-use plastics in their daily living. I wish key stakeholders like Hong Kong UST and French companies and restaurants in Hong Kong would support and take the lead in the plastic-free culture for protecting the environment, including the ocean. Last but not least, we appreciate the importance of science and technology, which can help us to tackle the challenge of climate change, water quality, and plastic waste, etc. In 2020, the government set up the Green Tech Fund, which supports R&D projects on green and relevant blue projects. Priority will be given to projects in some selected areas, including decarbonization, waste management, and water quality. Apart from the designated local public research institutes and R&D centers, companies in Hong Kong are welcome to join. Let's work together to protect our planet. Thank you.
I thank very much Mr. Wong Kam-sing, Secretary for the Environment, for his opening remarks. I will now give the floor to Professor Chen, Head and Chair Professor at the Department of Ocean Science, for opening remarks. Professor Chen, over to you.
This one, right? Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Well, so the colleagues and friends, good morning, also good afternoon, depends on where you are. Today is the European Maritime Day. It gives me the great honor to welcome you all to the WONG Ocean Conference organized by our university and Consulate General of France in Hong Kong, Macau. So my name is Pei-Yuan. I'm the department head at the department head of the ocean science at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Why I cannot move? Okay, what's going on? Oh, here we go. Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. At this conference, we will focus on the tangible actions and solutions for two grand challenges: plastic pollution and blue finance. We all embrace the concept of one planet, one ocean, because the ocean not only covers 71% of the Earth's surface, but also holds huge resources for future economic, social, and cultural development. Our life is so much depends on ocean's service and functions, since more than 40% of the human beings living on coastal areas. To achieve sustainable development, the United Nations have initiated Ocean Decade in 2017, aimed to address 10 challenges in 10 years from 2021 to 2030. The vision of the Ocean Decade is a science we need for the ocean we want. As a sole academic unit in ocean science and technology in Hong Kong, we strive to safeguard our marine ecosystem. So under the leadership of President of the Professor Xi, our university has stepped up its effort in ocean science and technology research and education in recent years, and established a Department of Ocean Science in 2018. So our department has grown steadily. Currently, with the 18 faculty members, more than 120 graduate students, about also the 120 undergrads. Our faculty are very active in conducting the collaborative research locally and internationally. We also develop large research platforms to facilitate international collaborations, such as Hong Kong branch of the Southern Marine Science and Engineer Guangdong Laboratory, and also the Hong Kong Academy of Marine Science and Engineers. So taking the Hong Kong branch as the examples, we have built a large and multiple institutional collaboration platforms, support 98 affiliated members from 8 countries, also 23 collaborative institutions, including the Sorbonne University in France. Under our program, there are over 300 young scholars under trainings. Our research really is a focus on 4 focal areas, spanning from the ecosystem dynamics and safeties to the marine pollutions and to the marine biotechnologies. So that in total, we found 61 research projects in recent years. With all those support and collaborations, we made a lot of breakthroughs in just about little bit more than 2 years. Under the Hong Kong branch effort, we published over 240 papers. This all come out from the collaborative effort. And we made a lot of the big and important breakthrough. Among of those the papers, more than 80 papers published in the top tiers international journals. We're also developing the new technologies, apply for patents. For example, we have some non-toxic anti-fouling coatings that can be used to replace the toxic marine coatings in the industries. So overall, through this kind of the international and local collaborations, we can protect our marine environment much better. So protection of our blue oceans is our missions and common goals. So let us work together to protect our oceans and cherish the diversity of nature resources. Finally, I wish you all a fruitful conference. Thank you very much. Thank you. Back to the chairman.
Thank you very much, Professor Chen, for this very inspiring presentation on the actions of HKUST to preserve our oceans. It's now time to start our first panel discussion on the preservation of marine life. For this, I will hand over to our first moderator, Professor Davis Bouckaert. He's adjunct assistant professor at the Division of Environment and Sustainability in HKUST. Professor Bouckaert, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of this very important discussion today. I am fortunate to be working at the HKUST campus here at Clearwater Bay, and I see every day as I come to work and as students come to study the beautiful Clearwater Bay that is hard to miss. It's right on the edge, and we have the most beautiful campus because of that. In fact, it's hard to imagine what Hong Kong could be without being surrounded by all of the beautiful water streams and oceans that we see on a regular basis. It's part of our identity, and it is who we are, and it's largely what made Hong Kong what it is today. So it's important for us to be considering all of the impacts on the oceans and waterways. In the past couple of years, we've had a bit of trouble because of the coronavirus, the pandemic. Many of us have stayed inside. Many of us may have missed the fact that things happening in the ocean are continuing as normal. And we may also be missing the fact that the things that we do on land, like using plastic disposables and other kinds of actions, have an impact on the ocean, even in ways that we don't see. And so it's important to have a conference like this so that we can actually bring the things that are invisible and make them visible to us, so that we're aware of our actions and what we're doing to harm the lifeblood of not only of our city, but of the world. So I'm pleased to be joined by two experts on this topic, and I'll introduce both of them right now, and then we'll start with the first and go right into a presentation from the second. And I'll take some notes while they're speaking, and then we'll have if there's time left over, we'll have a little discussion afterwards. But let me start off by introducing our two panelists. The first is Professor Hongbin Liu. He's the chair professor in the Department of Ocean Science here at HKUST, and a member of the Hong Kong branch of Southern Marine Science and Engineering, Guangdong Laboratory at Guangzhou. He obtained his PhD in oceanography from the University of Hawaii in 1997, and he joined HKUST in 2005 and specializes in marine microbial ecology and geochemical cycling. His current research interests include microbial diversity and metabolic functions, microbial food web dynamics, and carbon and nitrogen cycling, global change biology, and environmental stress in the estuarine and coastal ecosystems. Professor Liu serves as editor or editorial board member for numerous prestigious international journals and serves on a variety of panels for the Hong Kong SAR government, including the Red Tide Expert Advisory Group, Dumping at Sea Appeal Board Panel, and the Water Pollution Control Appeal Board Panel. Let me introduce our second panelist as well. Her name is Anne-Leila MEISTERTZHEIM. She has a PhD in marine biology from Université de Bretagne Occidentale in France. She received that in 2008. She's a molecular biologist with expertise in metazoan and microbial ecotoxicology. In 2018, she and Jean-François Guidon created the startup Plastic at Sea, which investigates the toxicity of plastics on marine organisms and the biodegradability of plastics at sea. So Plastic at Sea, the name, is hosted in Oceanographical Observatory of Banyuls, and plastic at sea interacts with foundations and NGOs, including the Odyssey, Race for the Water, and also the French Ministry of Ecological and Solidarity Transition. And the action and mission of this organization is to disseminate knowledge to the general public, quite like what we're doing today. So I'd like to start off with Professor Hongbin Liu, and he will give a presentation, and then we'll move directly into Anne-Leila MEISTERTZHEIM. Okay, Professor Liu, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, David. It's my honor to be a part of this meaningful, very important event. And let me see, I have 10 minutes, so I probably prepared too many slides. So David, please stop me. I may just touch the base, some of the slides. I won't talk too much. Okay, so you all know that our planet is a blue planet, okay, covered by ocean for 71% of its surface. And the ocean plays a very important role in all aspects, okay, economically and ecologically. And I won't talk too much about that. And we all love ocean. That's probably one of the reasons many megacity, many culture originally from the seaside. And here are a few beautiful places I admire. I personally visited over the time, Mont Saint-Michel in France, the blue Mediterranean in Nice, and of course HKUST here in Hong Kong. And you can go to Tai Au village to see the wonderful, beautiful Chinese white dolphin. Okay, so the global warming is true, okay, is real. And the temperature you see here in the past century increased for about 1 degree. And all different models predict it will increase another 3 or 4 degrees by the end of this century. And this has created a big problem, okay, serious threat to the marine life. For example, here, the polar bear, you know, due to the melt of Arctic ice sheet, they lost, you know, difficult to survive. And in Sea of Japan, you see this giant jellyfish bloom, okay? So the fishermen cannot catch any fish. And of course, the coral, which is very sensitive to temperature and some other environment or condition, can become white, called a coral bleach. You know, coral, as you know, is a symbiote system. Okay, so if the water become too warm, the coral will expel the symbiotes, which is dinoflagellates. Then it become white. Okay, if this kind of event is short-lived, just a day or two, then it may be recovered, the coral. But if it's prolonged, then it's become irreversible. So the old coral will die. This is an event in 2014, 2015 in the American Samoa. Okay, so by now, scientists, okay, all the general public all accept that the warming is caused by human activity, okay, mainly greenhouse effect. And among them, CO2 is the most important one, okay? So this record made in Hawaii showing constant increase in the atmosphere CO2 concentration. Right now, it's around 415. And there's evidence, clear evidence, good correlation between CO2 concentration and temperature based on this ice core data in the last several glacial, interglacial period. Okay, so we are in very dangerous situation. Maybe it's a tip point whether we can get back to the normal. Okay, but you may not know ocean is the largest carbon pool you see here. Okay, on the Earth, and they play as important as the terrestrial ecosystem in total primary production and the carbon absorption. Okay, and ocean absorb carbon through this biological pump, so-called. Okay, so this is a process, this phytoplankton, which is a primary producer equivalent to the trees and the grasses on the land, and they do photosynthesis, fix carbon, and this carbon is provided through this food web, and some of them may reach the high trophic level as fisheries, and lots of them may export to the deep ocean, and they will be buried there for thousands of years. So this is the way of carbon remove, and that's great. But since the ocean absorbs so much CO2, and the seawater become more acidic, and that's bad for the marine life, especially those with skeleton made by calcium carbonate, such as coral and some microorganisms such as cocolith forest, because acidic water will dissolve calcium carbonate. And more seriously is this synergetic effect, both warming and acidification. Okay, while warming acidification affects the global ocean, the coastal zone are especially vulnerable due to this pollution, human activity. So all kinds of different pollution, which I won't have time to go detail. But you see here in where we are, the Pearl River Delta region, rapid urbanization and industrialization. Okay, so you see the land use change and all become serious. And as a result, the Pearl River discharge in the estuary, the nutrient increase constantly in the last several decades, and the dissolved oxygen decrease. Okay, so as a result, all kinds of red tides, harmful algal bloom occurred in Hong Kong, which I won't go detail. And another consequence is the so-called hypoxia, because this huge nutrient input and causing phytoplankton bloom, and this organic matter sink to the bottom ocean, coastal abatement, coastal sea, and this bacterial degradation exhausts all the new oxygen. At the same time, due to this stratification, of water column, the oxygen cannot be supplied to the bottom layer. So the oxygen depleted, and that can kill all the marine organisms, marine life there, if they cannot escape. Okay, so usually it's defined as less than 2 milliliter of oxygen per liter. Okay, so you see here, this is a video clip from the Baltic Sea, and this one from Oregon coast, due to this hypoxic event, this dead juvenile crab washed on shore. Okay, another big threat is the plastic, which my colleague, Dr. Anne-Leila will talk for details. Okay, and we have also done a little bit on this nanoparticle, nanoplastic on the phytoplankton, which I also don't have time to talk all the details. equally threatening the coastal environment is these nanoparticles, okay? Especially these metal nanoparticles. And we have been doing this toxicity of silver nanoparticles in our lab, okay? Because this silver nanoparticle, they have a superb antibacterial and antiviral capability. They are widely used in many consume and products, okay, such as cosmetics, pants, clothing, okay, all kinds of products. And this waste of these products is discharged to the coastal environment through sewage. And they causing a big problem because they are antibacterial. They can very toxic to organisms. And we have studied some zooplankton actually found that the gut microbe in the zooplankton, they can help their host to detoxify this the nanoparticle the toxicity. Okay, and okay, David mentioned this COVID-19 pandemic really causing some problem, and you see we have disposed a huge amount of mask, and this mask, the major component, okay, the material that made this mask is some plastic, okay, and they can causing huge problem. And this study done by City University, a team, they collected masks from the coast beach, and they soaked them in the seawater, and they found the release of plastic nanoplastic particles. And this green one is every day, and in the period of 9 days, they increased a huge amount. And this yellow is the control, okay? And they can be ingested by zooplankton and then by fish, okay? So that's a lot of problem. So the solution, you know, this we are now talking about carbon neutral and the blue carbon. So the coastal zone has a huge amount of this so-called blue carbon, okay? Mangroves, salt marsh, seagrass, they can absorb a huge amount of CO2 and store huge amount of carbon, okay? And but they are also under threat, okay? So one of the very ecologically valuable, high ecological value habitats is seagrass, okay? And they are under constant shrinking due to various pollution and climate change, okay? So in Hong Kong, we are also studying this. We have 4 species of seagrass, and we started a project to plant seagrass and do a study here. Okay, I think my time is over. And another project is to restore the oyster reef, okay, which can clean the seawater and so on. So I can answer more questions during the Q&A season time. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you for that. That's a really interesting and great overview of the broad range of problems and issues that we need to address. So I'd like to go ahead and turn over to Dr. Anne-Leila MEISTERTZHEIM. If you could share your screen, you could start when you're ready.
Okay, I ask you for just a second. Sorry. I'm sorry also for the webcam. I don't know. Ah, it's right on now. Ah, it's okay. So, hi everyone. It's really a pleasure to speak with you about a very important topic for me because it concerns directly the pollution linked to the plastic. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it. Looks great. Well, we see it in the presentation mode.
Okay, is it okay like that?
That's better. Yes, good.
Okay, thanks. So, so I'm Leila MEISTERTZHEIM, and as you present me, I'm a marine biologist, and I created a company that is linked directly to the assessment of the toxicity and biodegradation of plastic at sea. So the question was, what was presently what was presented before, the problem of plastic, and you have to know that one plastic is not. It's not one plastic. The problem is the plastics generally because it's a primary structure of different polymers, and these polymers can create a large variety of products. And because this plastic is cheap with incredible property, we have used these materials to create a really important proportion of disposable products. And this linked to an overconsumption that have created the marine pollution that we observe now. So the plastic pollution, the plastic production in the world was more than now 400 million tons in 2020. And we know that there are a lot of different countries that created this production. And we have a problem because if we take into account the production of this plastic, we have not enough. We have not taken into account the future of these plastics. So, for example, in Europe, we know that there is a large quantity of plastic that will finish in a dump in the recycling plant, for example, and that also are used for energy. But the source of the problem is linked to the overconsumption of single-use plastics and the insufficient collection that are linked directly to a release of these plastics directly at sea. So we estimated that from the garbage, we have 10% of these plastics that will finish directly at sea. And we know also that between 30 and 40% of the waste comes directly from the consumers. And this problem in few years will normally create a change in the ocean. And maybe in the future, we will observe the change of the community. And for now, we have maybe one plastic for 3 fishes, for example. And what is planned now is the fact that in 2050, we will have in the sea exactly the same quantity of plastic compared to the number of fishes. And in case of they will arrive to survive to this. So these products, all these plastic are not floating really at the surface of the ocean. Some of them are aggregates in the gyre, for example, in different gyre in the oceans. And we know now that this pollution is not only the big plastics that we have in your mind, but also the fragmentation of this plastic in microplastic that will, and also in nanoparticle, as it was presented before. And we know that this microplastic will enter directly in the food chain. We know that in Mediterranean Sea, for example, this sea is totally polluted by the microplastics, and normally we will observe an increase by 8% by 2030. So this is a huge problem that now we have to raise. The problem is linked also to the fact that when we observe plastics, it's only the tip of the iceberg, because when we are doing internationally recognized protocols, for example, to identify the plastics floating at sea, we use Montanet. And these protocols led us to obtain the quantity of microplastic floating, but correspond only to 1% of the contribution of all the plastic from the continent. And so we know now that 8 million tons of plastics that float per year are found in the sea, coming from the continent. So we have to take them into account, and we know also that they disappear in the ocean linked to different processes, the sedimentation, the fragmentation, and also the use by the organisms. So now we have to take into account the impact of this pollution on the different organisms. So for sure we have a visual pollution, and also different alteration of the physiology of the organisms linked to the digestive system. So we have the strangulation and obstruction of the digestive system for the bigger organisms. And we observe also in some area, in particular in the Mediterranean Sea, we observe that in a plate of one fish, we have the half of zooplankton, and the other half correspond to microplastics. So it's really something important for them, because it will create it also energy modification. So because these organisms try to eat zooplankton and eat also microplastic, and this will lead to problems in the energy supply. So we also know that these organisms, at the surface of this microplastic, we have different pollutants that can be absorbed at the surface. For example, pesticide, hydrocarbon, and a lot of different components. And they will create it also a chemical toxicity for the organisms which takes this microplastic as a zooplankton. And these plastics are also a vector of different organisms, including pathogen and including invasive species. So plastics, it's a big threat with the different part of toxicity. You have the mechanical, biological, and chemical, and different things of problem that will create it together a real problem for the organism that will not arrive to survive to this all stressor together. So if we are looking to the impact of this plastic on the marine organisms, we know that we found a lot of microplastics on the shrimp, for example, in oysters, on salt, and also on the water that we can drink. And we know that for some species that were studied in Europe, for 140 species that were sampled, we measure plastic in their stomachs, and half of them are part of our diet. For these organisms, we have impact on the energy supply, on the growth, on the immune systems, on the reproduction. So it's all of this impact that will create a problem maybe in the future, and create also change in the different species that represent the ecosystem. So all of this microplastic that we eat were observed also in the human body. For example, we observed that for some volunteers that were followed during a few months, we observed up to 20 microparticles per 10 grams of excrement. So it was realized in different countries, and we found each time microplastics. So we are impacted by these plastics. We are also impacted, for example, for women, we also found microparticles in 4 placenta that were in 12 placenta that were followed, and we have identified that these microparticles are from the side of the mother and also from the side of the baby. So at this time, to date, we have not enough information to really understand if all these microparticles will have an effect directly on our health. But we have one study that I have shown before, that it was one study presented 1 month ago, that highlight the fact that when we observe an increase of microparticle in our digestive system, we have also an increase of some particular disease of the digestive system. So how can we reverse? And this is a big question. So we know that there is a lot of solutions that are now presented in different countries. So we have some boats that are going directly to the 7 continents of plastics to try to remove this plastic from the sea. There are different projects with a lot of funding when you are looking to that. If we take, for example, the ocean cleanup project, so this is a very big net of 120 meters of length that will be maintained at the surface of the 7 continents. But it's not true that the plastic are with big size floating at the surface. It's more an aggregate between 2 meters and 30 meter depth. So it's not really possible to remove all of this plastic from the sea. And if we are looking to the quantity that will be removed from 2018 to 2025, for example, we will observe that during this all this period, the ocean cleanup will normally have accumulated 400 more. This ocean cleanup will remove only the few parts that you can see on this slide, corresponding only to one small proportion, and that during this period, 400 more plastic will arrive from the river directly to the oceans. So it's the solution clearly for us, it's not at sea. And now we have to change our use, our production, and everything that is possible. So the last number correspond to 80% of all the plastic waste that are coming from terrestrial sources, and that correspond normally to a garbage tank dump every minute in the oceans. So how can we act concretely? You have to know that the nature produces no waste. So now the goal is really to change our process to consume everything, and to try to take into account every step of the production, of the use, and of the collection of one plastics, to be sure at the end that we are in a circular economy. And this is really what we would love to do. So to verify this, we have different solutions. So we have biodegradable plastics, we have recycling plastic, for example, recycled plastics, and we have also to reduce the plastic when it's not really something that we can do without these plastics. So this is what we are doing in Plastic at Sea. So we take into account the different mechanisms of the biodegradation of plastic, and we follow them in marine environment, taking into account the 4th stage of the biodegradation that correspond to colonization, fragmentation, use by the microorganisms, and after the respiratory phenomenon. So normally here, when we try to do this, the goal is really to verify that what we follow is correspond directly to what will be observed normally in the marine environment. And this led us to obtain this type of graph on which you can observe that if we have some petroleum-based plastic that didn't show any biodegradation, but for one of them we found a few parts, but we found a proportion of biodegradation in marine environments, and it was also observed in a biosource 1 plastic. And as you can see here, there is also some biosource plastic that didn't present any biodegradation at sea, just because the sea is really a difficult environment because the temperature is really stable, and because you have the waves, you have not a lot of abrasion, so it's complicated to observe really this biodegradation compared to the terrestrial environment. And taking this into account, the goal really for the future is to verify the toxicity of the plastic, because we don't have to propose an alternative that is worse than the problem at the beginning. The solution needs to be verified at the beginning of its production, during the first step of this design. And to do that, we need to verify the impact of the microplastic that can be obtained starting from a bottle of plastic, for example, starting from the product, and also taking into account the additives that are put on the plastic and that will change the plastic. And to do this, we try to create a group in France, but also in another country, just to increase the number of tests that we can do now, starting from these plastics. And we take into account marine organisms, including bacteria, invertebrates, and also aquatic organisms, because we also need to take into account the toxicity that can be released, that can be observed by this plastic released in the river. So it's something that it's starting now, and we try to create new collaboration on this point to be sure that we will finally at the end propose the best alternative for these plastics. And so this is this is a plastic at sea company, and we are, as you can see here, in the south part in France. So we are in the Oceanological Observatory of Banyuls-sur-Mer, so one of the 3 stations of Sorbonne University. And we are in a pristine environment, and also in contact with different national and international academic network. And so I'm really pleased to be there today, and I hope that maybe you will contact me to create new collaboration in the future. And I would just thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That was really very sobering to see. I'd like to say it was a great presentation. It was, but it was also hard to watch in some areas, especially seeing things like those animals and even the fetus. You know, it's shocking, and we should be shocked, because we are, you know, absolutely destroying the lifeblood of our planet, and we can't survive if we continue to do so. I think we are just about out of time, but there was a question, and I thought it would be good if we could just have a very, very quick, I'm sorry, but very quick answer from each of you about obviously that we need to stop this upstream. We need to prevent all of this plastic from getting into the ocean. Obviously, that's something that can be dealt with, hopefully through better regulation and policies and so forth. But we have a ton, literally or figuratively, tons and tons of plastic already in, and all of that plastic will just start to break up into smaller and smaller pieces, and it's very hard, as you mentioned, it's very hard to get it out. So maybe just in 1 minute or less a piece, any thoughts, any ideas about how do we deal with the damage that we've already caused before we start preventing more damage?
I'm really sorry for this question, because the answer will be really not so clear. I'm sorry for that. It's too late. For us, it's for the scientific community now, it's too late to remove all of them from the river and from the ocean. Now what we have to do is to change and to stop this release. And maybe before we will take into account what we have already put on all the waste we have already put on the ocean. But for us now, what we need to do is to change.
Yeah. Okay. Professor Leo, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Anne-Leila. Yeah, I guess you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we have no very good way to cure this problem. Yeah, except reduce and try to do some research, see if what kind of a health problem or environment damage they can cause, and we may try to mitigate.
Right.
Yeah, but it's hard to remove, especially those micro plastic nano size.
Right. Well, thank you. I wish it was an easy answer, but if it was easy, then someone would have already figured it out. So I think this is a lot of work for us to do. We have an agenda. Obviously, we're going to have to keep going. And I think this is a time where maybe we'll wrap up this session and we can hand over to the next. Maybe the green finance experts might have or the blue finance, maybe they have some ways of being able to solve these problems as well. So on behalf of everyone on the Zoom call today, on the panel, I'd like to really give a heartfelt thanks to Professor Hongbin Liu here at HKUST and Dr. Anne-Leila MEISTERTZHEIM. Thank you both very much, and we hope that you'll stick around and perhaps we can continue this conversation afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Davis. Thank you, audience.
Thank you so much.
All right, and we'll turn this back over to the moderator.
All right, okay. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are, everybody. My name is Veronique. I teach finance at the HKUST. I'm also the co-director of our new program, Bachelor for Sustainable and Green Finance, which we will start teaching our intake in the fall. So it is my pleasure to introduce my two distinguished panelists, Mr. Antoine Rose, who is the head of sustainable banking for Asia Pacific and the Middle East at Crédit Agricole CIB, and Mr. Jean-Marc Champagne, who's head of environmental finance and bankable nature solutions Asia Pacific for WWF. Gentlemen, welcome. It's a pleasure to see you. We're going to start this panel by sharing by each of my speakers, and I will ask to start with Antoine. So let me share the screen with the slides, if I can get them up. Here we go. Are they right? Okay. Can you see the slides? Huh? Okay, view. Full screen mode. Can everybody see the slides properly?
Yes, on my side.
Is it okay? You can see them? No problem?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
good. Okay, well then, Antoine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Veronique. It's a pleasure for being with you today to talk about sustainable finance and how this new instrument, this new markets, this new labeling could serve the financing of project, environmental and social projects dedicated to the ocean. I am head of sustainable banking for Crédit Agricole, in charge of APAC and Middle East, and it's a very important topic for the bank, for Crédit Agricole. I think we can hear from a lot of other banks that is an important matter, but for Crédit Agricole, let me say that we started the journey more than 10 years ago, and it gave us a pioneer role, and we have been active in a lot of innovation in this kind of market and active in the governance of this market. So today, I will try to show you a couple of figures, charts about green bond, many green bond markets, and how it's financing this kind of project. I will question also the blue bond labeling. It could be the immediate answer of the question how financial market could help this kind of financing, but it's more complicated than that, and I hope I will can able to bring some immediate answer, and happy to dig into during the Q&A session. So on the first slide, I have a chart showing the growth of debt market, capital market, so the bonds and the loans dedicated to environmental and also social purpose. We have different colors showing the different type of instruments. So in terms of debt format, but in terms of structure. Green, social, sustainability is about what we call a use of proceeds structure, when the borrower for a loan or the issuer for a bond is taking the commitment to only finance green project when it's green, social project when it's social, obviously, and sustainability when it's a combination. Is a very simple type of structure, as you can imagine, is a question of transparency, traceability, and accountability. Transparency because you explain how you will use the fund from the bond and the loan. Traceability because you have to put in place some system internally in order to track the use of the proceeds or the money from the bond or for the loan until the project. And accountability because banks for the loan and investors for the bonds will ask you a couple of years after the transaction if actually you did what you announced, I mean finance environmental or social project. You have in this graph, and it's very interesting because it's the growth on the right-hand side, on the light blue, is what we call sustainability-linked structure, which is not anymore about the type of project you are financing, but the performance of the borrower, of the issuer in terms of sustainability. I mean, you are defining indicators to measure this performance, and this performance could be, related to biodiversity, for instance, and there is an impact on the pricing of the product, the financial product. So the price could increase if there is another performance, and increase and decrease, so get a bonus if there is another performance. It's basically, so use of proceeds and sustainability link, the two structures we are seeing in the market. This graph is showing that the market boom the last 3-4 years. And now the volume is very significant. All the debt issued with this kind of structure last year, 2021, for instance, is $1.6 trillion equivalent. And this assumption starts, as you can see, a little bit more 10 years ago. So a massive success. Within this universe, if I make a focus, so it's on the next slide, on the blue bond. So some people could ask for, issuing more blue bond on this kind of product. Today, if you put that figures into perspective, blue bond, as you can see, issued is 5 transactions, at least in the public market, for $1.5 billion. So 0.5% of the entire issue of debt last year, for instance. And if you look at just bond, is about outstanding around 0.1%. So very minimal. If we dig into a little bit, so the labeling, so Republic of Seychelles, for instance, or Asian Development Banks called the operation Blue Bond because it was dedicated to marine protection or financing of preservation or restoration of ecosystem. Even if it's small universe, you can see that Nordic Investment Bank market quite more specifically the Nordic Baltic Sea as an area. So there is no homogeneity. There is no homogeneity in the label. And in terms of perception by the market, because it's dominated by the green as shown on the last graph, it's analyzed by investor demand banks in the same grid of analysis. Probably because the market is now in a phase of structuring. If we go to the next slide, you have the development of, in Europe, the European Commission is working on the taxonomy. So a clear definition of what would be considered as sustainable in Europe in terms of economic activity. This kind of definitions are a massive trend in terms of regulation for this market, which is coming from a classic request from investors in order to enhance their investment program, having a clear definition, opposable definition to avoid greenwashing accusation. Because it will be a regulatory, it will shape deeply the market. And this taxonomy in Europe is about all the environmental objectives. So is the column on this table. You can see that it's climate change. It's about 6 environmental objectives: climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, sustainable use and production of water and marine resources. Interesting, one of the objectives. Transition to a circular economy, pollution prevention and control, and protection, restoration of biodiversity and ecosystem. 6 environmental objectives. So the entire taxonomy is labeled as green. So it means that if you are compliant with one of these criteria, you can claim your transaction as a green bond, typically. And what we put in this table is the different sectoral activities identified by the European Commission as corresponding to the definition of the blue economy. Interestingly, it becomes quite complex. So it means that the blue labeling or the blue bond labeling will not fit very well within the taxonomy classification. For sure, because you can see that some activities are flagged under climate change mitigation, adaptation, water, of course, but also circular economy or protection and restoration of biodiversity. What I would like to show with this is we are reaching a phase of development of sustainable finance that is, from my point of view, unlikely to see a massive use of a blue labeling, because blue will not fit exactly within the regulation which are coming here. I'm taking the example of Europe because it's one of the leading parts on Earth about sustainable finance and related regulation. But in China, there is also the taxonomy and structure on the same basis. So it's definitely the blue needs to find a way through this regulation to be assessed by investors and get benefit from all this market. But on the next slide, I just want to show that even if it's a green bond, even if it's marketed as a green bond, it doesn't mean that it's not relevant for the blue economy. This example is, so the green bond issued by the Republic of France. I take this example on purpose. A couple of years ago, in 2017, a massive transaction, 7 billion. And if you look at the breakdown on the bottom, around 2.6 billion euro has been invested in the living resources area. And one of them was to support the financing of natural areas, so natural park, including maritime areas, or the financing of the waterway network in France. So it's green, completely part of the environmental policy, but because it's France, because we have this huge maritime domain under our responsibility, it's representing more than 20% of the allocation of this green bond. So even if it's not marketed, it's already financing some projects. It's true that compared to climate change, where there is a unique metric to design and define the environmental impact, certainly for projects related to water management and biodiversity, marine biodiversity, is more difficult. And it's an important element of this market is about the marketing. How you can explain, as I say, it's part of the accountability, or explain that you deliver the promise you make to the market. And it's first investment, and second, generating the positive environmental impact. In this slide, just to show, even for France, so a sovereign issuer with a lot of resources, a lot of expertise within the ministries, there was a challenge to gather the data to justify that the expenditures from the state budget identified to be refinanced by this bond transaction was delivering actual environmental impact. So they use indicators as the availability rate for the waterway network, for on one side, and the percentage of the territory covered by natural areas to illustrate their policy regarding biodiversity conservation. These kind of indicators, even if they are quantitative, they are not easy for investors to understand the ambition or to understand the underlying performance in terms of environment linked to this investment. And it's probably one of important limitations. To try to fulfill the gap, the French Republic invests in some huge impact reporting type expenditures by expenditures. And this one, as an example, published three years ago about the French Waterways Office. So to justify the environmental impact of that is around 60, 70 pages to discuss, and it's not easy. In terms of, again, of sustainable finance perspective, it's really important to take into consideration the potential marketing of the transaction we are considering. Because at the end, our role as Crédit Agricole at Sustainable Banking is to structure transaction and enable for the issuer to get benefit on the financial market about the sustainability strategy. So based on what has been done before, based on the ongoing regulation and so on, it needs to be, so the potential of blue related transaction need to be positioned within a larger scope, which is definitely the green universe. Thank you very much. I will stop here the presentation. And over to you, Véronique.
Thank you so much, Antoine. And now I'm going to pass the floor to, sorry, I'm playing around with my video, passing on the floor to Jean-Marc at WWF. Feel free to share your screen, Jean-Marc.
Okay, thank you, Veronique. Let me just get this up here.
Yeah, working.
Okay, why is it? Is it working? You see it? Okay.
I see a very pretty photo. Yeah. Okay.
Is it all sorted? Okay. It's all good. Is it showing a weird share screen on my end? Okay, good.
Yeah, you want to put it in presentation mode, I think.
Is it in presentation mode now?
No.
Oh, it says on my end. All right. Let me just.
Yeah, because that's what you see.
Let me just fix this. Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me try one more time. So. It's just sharing the one slide. I'm having a slight issue here. This is strange. Let me try one more time and redo it. Stop share.
And while Jean-Marc is sorting out the slide, may I encourage the audience to put questions for my brilliant panelists in the Q&A. I will be looking at them as we go.
There we go. I think this works now. Okay, is it better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
it was doing something strange. Yeah, actually, it's supposed to be the first one. Here we go. So they're all nice pictures at WWF. We have pretty photos. So thank you, Veronique, and thank you, Antoine, for your presentation as well. And what I'm going to do, what I'm going to talk about is what we're calling bankable nature solutions at WWF. But what it really is basically, taking all those instruments that are channeling money into better things for the environment and for social needs. But this is actually doing the work on the ground, and I'll explain a bit more as we go through this. And it's so essentially, what are bankable nature solutions and why do we need them? And I'll play a short little video here. It's about 90 seconds. And if there's any issue, please, Veronique, interrupt me and tell me if you can or can't hear it. And I'll have to re-share again. So let me just go here.
We're facing a climate and nature crisis which undermines the fabric on which our economies are based. Each year, we fall $2.5 trillion short of financing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Philanthropy and public finance alone will never fill this gap. But the tides are turning. Private investors are now willing to put their money into sustainable bankable projects. From large-scale forest restoration, climate-smart agriculture to wastewater treatment plants, bankable projects are clever investments that generate financial returns while building more resilient ecosystems, societies and economies. The only problem is there's been no pipeline of bankable projects, even though investors are keen to get the ball rolling. Because of that, financiers continue to invest in projects that degrade our ecosystems and ability to adapt to climate change. Regrettably, communities, businesses and countries end up paying the full social and environmental costs of these investments. WWF have crafted an innovative solution to blend public and private finance to create a pipeline of scalable, bankable projects. Redirecting financial flows into more sustainable projects is critical to the health of our natural resources. Thanks to our global expertise and extensive presence on the ground, WWF is well placed to make these financing opportunities happen now.
Yeah, so basically what, if you take a look at, what are there's a risk perception survey that was done earlier this year. And if you take a look at this, what are, the perceived biggest risks that we face over the next 10 years? Well, in this survey, you can see the top three are all environmentally related. So you have climate action failure, extreme weather, biodiversity loss, and then you have 7 and 8, which is human environmental damage and natural resource crises. And in between, you have these red ones, which are societal issues, but are indirectly related to the environment. So social cohesion erosion, as environments degrade and issues happen with the climate, you'll have this issue, livelihood crises, infectious diseases. So you can see the interrelationship of what we're talking about and the importance of what we're trying to or the task ahead of us, I guess you can say. So what we're trying to do and what we want to do is we want to scale up capital and get private investment involved. So currently, if you look at this chart, we have we need about 4.2 trillion US dollars to go into environmental and social needs to even come close to hitting the SDG targets, right? So currently we have about 1.7 trillion US dollars that's going into this type of work. And every year we're running a financial gap or deficit of 2.5 trillion. Now, you might say, well, that actually, that's not a bad looking number, 1.7 trillion. But if you compare it to what I would say is the global capital markets, if you look at global sector private debt, you're talking about 185 trillion. And listed equities, which are the stock markets around the world, is about 90 trillion. And then sovereign debt, you're talking about 70 trillion. So if you look at the bottom little corner where we are, what we're talking about with global development assistance, that's from the big, like the USAIDs and those types. We're talking only this small fraction. And if you talk about philanthropy, you can see what we're talking about there. So it's not a lot of money. So what we're trying to do is the whole point about bankable projects. Yes, it's to do projects that work on the environment, but the whole point is to mobilize private sector capital to get involved in this stuff. Because currently the way we're doing, or the way conservation has been done in the past, is we get a grant and we put that money into some work that we're doing, and that's kind of the end of it. What we want to do now is we want to take what we're trying to do is we're trying to make conservation into a business, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, but we want to take grant capital and then use that to incubate projects and then get investment capital involved in that. And that's the only way we think we're going to be able to achieve the goals that we need to achieve, because we're not going to get any more money. I don't think, we're going to get a lot more from global development assistance. And I don't think philanthropies, they're pretty, while there is a lot of money there, they're stretched. And I think there's limitations to what they can give. So how do we leverage that capital? Well, one way, and one thing that we need to do is when we look at conservation work, we need to involve the private sector in everything that we do. So the private sector, and that just doesn't mean investments, that also means corporate partners and other entrepreneurs that are working in particular areas that we're in, which we call landscapes. So the private sector, the reason why we want them involved is because they're active in almost all the landscapes that we work in around the world. And they're dependent on particular landscapes for their operations. They need the resources that the land and nature provides for them. And this also, by the way, also goes for seascapes. I know we're talking about oceans here, so this also is applicable to seascapes. And the other thing with the private sector, they're linked to the risks and pressures in the landscape or seascape. But we also want them because they command vast amount of financial resources, and they're very influential with the governments. They pay a lot of taxes, they employ a lot of people, so we want them involved in the work that we do. We think that without the private sector, we're not going to be able to achieve the level of goals that we need to achieve. We need them to really operate at a scale that is that we essentially need to save nature. If we don't have them involved, it's going to be very difficult to get where we want to go. And interestingly, we've come up with this idea, sure, but it was actually spurred on by the private sector themselves, both corporates and investment banks and commercial banks saying, hey, look, we want to get involved with this stuff, but we don't know how to identify the projects. We need WWF and others to help identify and incubate projects that we're going to work on. So what are we even talking about here? And what is, like, what am I, I'm saying bankable projects, but let's get down to what we're actually talking about. So what are they? What are bankable projects? So essentially, what does bankable mean? Let's start with that first. Bankable, we use that term, but it really means the same thing as investable. Banks and investors can finance the project that we're working on by providing a loan or equity investment. A bankable project is typically connected to a business. So as I was saying earlier, we're making conservation into a business, but it can also be connected to a new business or an improvement of an existing business. but also it needs to address market dynamics because what we're doing is a actual business and it's going to face competition. So we have to have that all set up. So what are criteria for bankable projects? Well, first and foremost, we wouldn't be WWF if we didn't have this part, but it has to have positive and environmental and social impact. But what makes it different from a traditional conservation project is that it has to have commercial value and generate predictable revenues. And it really needs to be financed by private capital that's looking for profits. And the other thing that's really important is all our projects, in order to attract the commercial sector, the private sector, is these projects that we work on have to have the ability to scale and or replicate. They need to be able to become big in size. And I'm talking about 50, 100 million US dollars in size. And to show you how it all works and what we do is, so we say this, we're leveraging capital, but what we do with WWF, we typically work in the grant stage where we get grant or seed funding or risk capital, if you want to call it that, to incubate and develop a project. And we work on that. We go through a process. It takes a few years to get a project from the inception to what it's actually going to do, the feasibility studies, technical assistance, is this actually going to work? Then we set up a pilot. Then we look to get investment capital at a much larger scale in the next stage. And that usually comes from development banks, impact investors. And then finally, we scale it up even more and look to scale and also replicate. And we get institutional investors and other financial institutions involved. What is bankability and how we come up with a bankable project candidate? Well, first thing, it needs to be a viable business, has to have a clear value proposition. Every project that we do has to have an experienced private sector owner. This is very typical of any type of project finance. There has to be market demand for what we're going to actually produce. We need to have a proof of concept. And it has to be proven technology. We're not going to do anything that is unproven or some kind of laboratory level type technology. And it has to be able to secure commercial contracts. We have to also identify any key constraints and also know the regulatory framework that we're working within. And we need support from all the partners, whether that be the private sector themselves, investors, governments, both on the local, regional, and provincial levels. And then we have to adapt, or then we have to come up with a high-level business plan and an estimated budget and financial forecasts and what this is all going to look like. It's no different than doing, basically venture capital is what we're doing. So then we come up with a candidate. Now, this doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work. It could still fail, but this is how we come up with a bankable project candidate. So, so that's what we do. And the important thing to know is that all our projects, while this is talking about the business case of it, they all have to contribute to some major environmental impact within that landscape. They can't just be a project for the sake of being a project. What we also try to do, just to keep in mind is, when we come up with these ideas, right, they have to have a value proposition. What is the problem that it's solving, and does the project reduce costs, and what additional revenue opportunity does the project bring? So that's what we need to think about as well when we develop our projects. And we typically, this is again a landscape, also seascape approach. When we look at a particular, we just don't go in and do one project. We try to look at it in a very high level approach, where we look at what we call landscape seascape approach. And what that involves is we try to identify opportunities to generate impact at scale across multiple landscape objectives and multiple project investment portfolios. So what we want to do is basically say in a landscape, where are the ecological pressure points, and how who are the companies and businesses that are reliant upon that landscape for their work. And then we try to implement projects in that particular landscape, solve the issues of that landscape, and at the same time get the private sector involved to help finance this whole process. So yeah, and the point in what is a landscape or seascape, if you don't know, it's basically small enough to maintain and be manageable, but it's also large enough to develop multiple functions to stakeholders with different interests. So just some examples. I think if I give one or two quick high-level examples, and we can discuss this in the Q&A as well if you'd like. But just so you have an idea of what we're even talking about in terms of projects. What does this all mean? You know, it's one thing to be theoretical, but let's actually talk about projects. Well, there's a few. And so one, I'll just give an example of, and then I'll give one also local to Hong Kong as well. But in Vietnam, we're working on a project, a rice and aquaculture project. What that is a particular project where we have land subsidence in the Mekong Delta, and at the same time we have sea level rise. And many of the rice farmers there have been told, you know, by command economy type structure, top down, government plans the economy. You need to grow this particular rice. Now, it hasn't been very successful over the past 20, 30 years, and it's been exacerbated by the fact that you have land subsidence and sea level rise. So they can no longer grow rice year round like they could before. And what we're offering to do and what we're trying to do is we're supplementing the rice growth with shrimp farming, so they can get two incomes. And at the same time, we're going to bring in natural irrigation methods to have the land flooded by rivers, let the rivers flow naturally as they should have before it's been, you know, totally changed in human intervention on irrigation. And what will happen with this, with the rivers flowing back in to do natural irrigation, it will slowly build up the land as it brings down land sediments and help offset the land subsidence. So there's a huge environmental impact and physical resilience there. So it has a big objective, but also it does something where it's a business. We can get investment into it to continue to build this up and at the same time get income for farmers. Another one I'll just highlight quickly because for time's sakes, we're looking at one in India where we're taking rice paddy or agricultural waste, and we're taking that and we're putting that through an anaerobic digester and turning that into energy and also food grade CO2. What that does is there's a huge pollution problem in India with the burning of agricultural waste. It takes away the pollution issues and at the same time contributes to climate or contributes to mitigate climate. So there's a big impact there as well. Something that we're looking at closer to home, because I'm based in Hong Kong, is a aquaculture project. And this is more also related to our oceans discussion. It's going to be an open water or mariculture project where we're looking to build a locally and sustainable best practice aquaculture project, and we want to get that off the ground. What that will do is not only help to provide food locally, because I think if anyone knows, Hong Kong imports almost close to 90% of its fish. This will help. We're trying to develop a more domestic market, get us to be more food resilient, if you want to call it that, and less dependent on imports. And we've seen how COVID has certainly made that an issue. So we need to be less dependent on imports. So what that will do also, you know, in terms of climate, if this actually scales up and we go beyond the pilot, we do it throughout the Greater Bay within Hong Kong and China, have multiple aquaculture sites, we can save on CO2 emissions and also contribute to biodiversity, where we're, you know, in terms of the preventing serious impacts on ocean ecosystems. So I'll leave it at that. That's, you know, I know we're kind of short on time, so I want to make sure you know, I'm keeping this very high level, and we can, and happy to take any questions in the Q&A.
All right, thank you so much, Jean-Marc. Could you stop sharing your screens? Yeah, great, fantastic. So we have everybody. Great presentations from both of you. But this is bringing me to a, you know, I look at the charts from Antoine and the examples that Jean-Marc has shared, and I'm wondering, is blue finance sufficiently visible, or is it being just a teeny little corner of the green finance? So either of you, please feel free to contribute.
Happy to start, and please, Jean-Marc, feel free to jump anytime. No, it's typically what my slides are demonstrating. Right now, blue finance, sustainable finance dedicated to blue project is a very tiny part of the entire landscape. So for a couple of reasons. One, the first one is, as I say, in terms of impact metric, in terms of size of the project, number of projects, it's definitely lower than other, you know, area of environmental topic like renewable energy, this kind of job. Again, certainly more developed with already in place a lot of policy to support this kind of business, a lot of utilities company active in this area. And so it's a fact. The second element of answer is there a potential for the blue finance as a proper level? As I tried to show, the regulations which are coming, which are called taxonomies, which are putting things into some boxes, are not certainly appropriate to reflect the complexity of the blue economy. So I do believe that this kind of market, sustainable finance, or all the the willingness of the financial market to take care about environmental, social aspects, are strong enough to finance impactful projects, but the labeling, the identification within this ocean of other projects will be a question mark.
Okay, thank you. Jean-Marc, what do you think?
I mean, there's still a way to go. We started off, I think, earlier with so-called green, but I think it's a natural evolution to go into blue. If we take a look at the projects that we're working on, we're trying and we're moving more into the blue space. I think other things that'll help, I'm speaking mainly, from when I mentioned bankable aspect, but I think we can also look at things where, if we're talking about MPAs and other areas that are maybe not bankable, we can look at other ways to finance, either through bond or debt issuance, but also through things like outcome-based financing. So you're essentially, you're paying or rewarding for outcomes and the outputs that you deliver on your particular projects. So I think, we're just touching on that. And I think there is a lot more to come with the blue space. It just, I think, started a bit later. But I think, it's equally, obviously, it's, the planet is made up of a lot more blue than green. So it's very relevant. And it's something we need to do, and we need to develop these type of financing opportunities. But I also think that, for us on the bankable side, that, a lot of this will revolve around things like food or fishing for the time being, but we also have to think of other innovative ways to channel more financing into oceans.
Right. So the previous panel had some very alarming news in terms of the deterioration of the oceans and the invasion of plastic. Do either of you have any examples of finance being deployed to remedy some of these problems, like coral revival or financing equipment to remove plastics, or anything that you have seen that would be somewhat contributing to those big problems that our previous panelists have talked about?
I mean, I can just jump in. I mean, I'm not a oceans expert. I'm I look at things from a finance, I look at green, I look at blue, but in the plastics, I'm not an expert there either. But I would say that in terms of, I think, and this, I'm sure this has been said, and many know this, but this has to start from the top, right? We can't right now cleaning up the oceans. Yes, that's important, but if we're just continuing to produce this stuff and use it and keep dumping it back in, then we're basically wasting. We're not really accomplishing much. So I think, yes, we do need to clean it up, but at the same time, we need to stop it at the source. That has to happen. I think. Is finance necessary for that? I would say it's more advocacy that has to happen on that front, and it needs to be at the government level where we're petitioning, or putting pressure on governments to stop companies from doing this. That's where it really has to stop. But in terms of actual ideas, when you clean it up, yeah, we're working on a few projects actually taking plastics, turning it into actually usable oil, and other type of other things that can be used. It's at first when I heard about it, I was like, that sounds very small. There's some big chemical companies that are interested in this type of stuff.
Antoine, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, as a complement, I think we saw a couple of green bonds issued by the industrial sector, the chemical sector, refinancing some R&D or expenditures related to project to generate bioplastic, this kind of, so working on the first front to replace or stop the production of conventional plastic. Of course, as is an economic activity, then it would be easier to refinance it on the financial market. Just maybe to open as a the food for thought, the question of removing plastic from the ecosystem, and finally how to finance it. If I may make a parallel with the carbon and carbon emissions, there is some geographies in which if you are intending some actions to not necessarily remove CO2 from the atmosphere, but to avoid future potential emissions, it generates carbon credits. Mm-hmm. And this carbon credits can be tradable on a regulated market. And on this, we can intervene as a bank. So if the parallel is relevant, it means that for this question, it would be great to see some geographies setting up some regulation, asking for industrial active in the plastic area to finance action to reduce, and then for each action to reduce, generating like a plastic credit, and then it becomes a tradable market, and we can be active and replicate what I just explained. So if you have an action to remove, generating some certificates or credits in the market, then it will be easier to finance this kind of action.
Well, which brings me to a question that has been submitted in the Q&A, and I think I'll direct it to Jean-Marc because you touched on that point in your presentation. So what are the ways to make the projects both profitable and have positive environmental impact?
Yeah, I think, Veronique, I think that I mean, it goes without saying that if the project has to be profitable because it's a business, but maybe there's a misconception of that being profitable. If it's profitable, it can't possibly be environmentally friendly. I'm not sure where the thought of the question is, but there is a lot of thinking that way, and there used to be that thinking. I'm sure you've heard it before, even only about when I first started here about 6 years ago, where people were saying, oh, if you go into green things, you're going to be giving up return. That has completely been debunked, right? So the first thing to understand is that you're building a project, and what we're doing on the rice and aquaculture project that I mentioned in Vietnam. I mean, currently they're doing rice farming only. We're adding a organic and highly profitable shrimp, actually 2 species, into the whole business line. And it's not just a farmers doing it. We also have the largest shrimp processor in Vietnam who is actually investing into the project, but also will be the off-taker of the product. So clearly there's a value proposition and there is a profit to be made. And the impact comes from what I was saying is how we're bringing the natural irrigation methods back into these areas and letting the rivers flow naturally to then bring in land sediments or river sediments to build the land back up. So yeah, they go hand in hand. And same with the India project, which I mentioned. We're taking, profitably taking rice paddy straw waste, agricultural waste, turning it into energy and then selling it. So, and the contributions there are less CO2 and less pollution.
Okay, Jean-Marc, do you want to contribute? We're getting to the end of the panel, so I want to give you a chance for one more contribution. I know it's been very short, but maybe tell us, where do you see the growth of ocean finance in Asia from your perspective?
I think the ocean finance. I mean,
yes, Jean-Marc.
Yeah, you said. Did you mean Antoine? I can get either one.
I actually meant Antoine.
Okay, go ahead, Antoine.
Wrap up the panel. Sorry, but that's okay. No, both of you share.
Go ahead, Antoine.
If it's talking about the international debt market, it's fair to say that energy transition, I see energy transition, the hot topic for the coming months and years. I think decarbonization is still a challenge, a technical challenge for a lot of economies. And the geopolitical background is definitely, challenging the dependency of a lot of economies to fossil fuels. We are seeing cost increase everywhere. So I see this trend here to stay. But as climate change is also related to ocean and the blue economy, in the sense that acidification is linked to the global GHG emissions, they will add. But I see energy as the main driver of the marketing, the operation that will structure in the coming months.
Okay, Jean-Marc, the last word.
Yeah, I would say, look, I mean, this is just the beginning. In ocean finance, you know, in Asia, there's a lot of dependency on coastal lines. You know, I'm working, just actually, we're going to start working on a project. I mean, if you consider UAE part of Asia, we'll be working on a project there that's going to be looking at all, you know, the coasts and how we can start generating huge conservation impact or environmental impact. But in our case, we're going to try to make it bankable. But the other thing we're trying to do is develop not just projects, we're trying to develop financing facilities that can help finance this. And so there is a big demand for ocean work. And I think we can, you know, we can just have a separate segregated fund that develops these type of projects for oceans. But it's just the beginning. I think, you know, I think right now it's a lot of it's going to be centered around food for bankable products. But eventually, when we figure out how we can make things like, you know, the carbon credit, you hear a lot of that in coral reef credits or biodiversity credits. We're still a long way off from that actually becoming reality. I mean, carbon credits, yes, only on a very small amount. But if you look at mangroves and how you account for that, we're not there yet. But once we get there, I think there's a lot more to be done, and I think we'll accomplish a lot more in that space. But I think we're still, the problem comes with verification and the expense at verification. It's seriously expensive to do this, and there's not enough capacity. And so we have to figure that out. That's a huge bottleneck right now in verification of all of this.
Well, thank you very much. I could speak with you guys for hours, but I'm not allowed to. I'm supposed to be wrapping up this panel. So I would like to thank you, Antoine and Jean-Marc, for wonderful presentations, very interesting discussion, lots of potential. And of course, HKUST stands ready to work with both of you and your respective organizations going forward. Now we are concluded our panel discussion, and it is my honor to invite Mr. Alexandre Giorgini, Consul General of France for Hong Kong and Macau, to give the closing remark.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Good evening. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Veronique. Thank you very much. So, first of all, a great thank to all panelists, to all distinguished panelists. I think this conference is very symbolic today for two reasons. The first one is that we celebrate today the European Maritime Day. And second reason is that we are in HKUST. HKUST is, of course, the best university in Hong Kong, but is also the university which is settled right on the seashore, and this is also a very symbolic location. So for me, what are the conclusions of the exchanges that we had today? I would say that I will keep two main conclusions. The first one is that oceans is not only a problem. We have the solutions. We have some solutions, and I'm very happy that hearing the panelists, we see that we have technical solutions, we have legal solutions, we have also maybe financial solutions. So this is one good conclusion that we have. The second positive thing that I would like to keep as a lesson of our exchanges is that maybe times are changing, and we have to stop thinking of including blue in the green. We have to begin to think about blue as really a specific subject, not only part of green. And I would say that in France, we have a big, an historic awareness of that. Of course, we are the country which was at the initiative of the Paris Agreement on climate change in 2015. And people forget that we have the second largest exclusive economic zone in the world, with a presence in 3 oceans. Of course, the Atlantic one, but also the Indian Ocean with the island of Réunion, and the Pacific Ocean with New Caledonia, Polynesia. This is the reason why we decided to organize a couple of weeks ago the One Ocean Summit in Brest, Brittany. And it may seem, only symbolic, the fact that a lot of countries gathered to discuss the issues and the challenges for the oceans. Of course, diplomats were there. What did they produce? They produced a text. And, so sometimes things have to begin with text, written things, no immediate effects. But this is the beginning of a process. And this is, for me, very positive. This is a beginning. So we have a text. We have a text, the Brest commitments for the oceans, with clear and identified goals, which are preserve biodiversity, two, stop over exploitation of marine resources, three, fight pollutions, and four, mitigate climate change. And I think we are the text. So it's not so bad. It's not so bad. It's a beginning of awareness for the whole international community. I'm very happy that we did this conference with HKUST, because HKUST has developed a unique expertise on ocean science, and ocean science is a scientific discipline. It's a scientific discipline. With the creation of an oceanography department under the umbrella of Professor Pei-Yuan, and this is, I think, I'm very optimistic. They will have a lot of work. This department, I'm afraid, will have a lot of work in the next year. I'm very proud, of course, that I see HKUST and French universities enjoying an exceptional relationship, and oceans are really a part of that. We signed 4 years ago a memorandum of understanding with HKUST France Innovation Hub, which was launched. And in a few minutes, I'm very happy, because with Professor Weishi, we will renew a memorandum of understanding. And just at the core of this new text, there will be sustainability. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of work on oceans. So thank you, and now, of course, a lot of work. And let's be blue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monsieur le Consul. And now it is my pleasure to invite our president, Professor Weishi, to give his closing remarks.
Consul General, colleagues, friends, I'm very happy to have this opportunity to join you in offering support for HKUST in this very meaningful exchange. We all know that ocean support, regulate, and help survive our planet, because it's in vast volume, it's huge diversity, and it's very, very important role in terms of providing many of us, not only human beings, but including especially human beings, many resources. On the other hand, I think there is an urgent need for us to better understand, appreciate, and make proper use of the resources and the reservoir provided by ocean. We at HKUST, we have a division called Ocean Science. It was founded a few years ago with Professor Pei-Yuan as the head. With Pei-Yuan and the numerous experts supporting and leading the Ocean Science division, we now have a quite dynamic group educating and doing research in this very important area. In parallel, we also have another division called Environment and Sustainability. So between the two, and also many other colleagues, leading and working in research institute and centers. I think at HKUST, I can say in the most genuine sense, we have been in practice putting sustainability, ocean, and all related topics with very high priority and commitment. Now, coming to today's topic, as some colleagues may know, my own training is aerospace engineering. So I study things up there. When we discuss the formation of the Ocean Science Division, I mentioned this to my colleagues. In many ways, we know much more up there than down there. Because ocean, even though it seems to be much more accessible to us, with its very complicated ecosystem, geometry, and properties, there are many, many different variety of the species, plants, and many other resources that we really have not even begun to understand properly. Now, since it is also our backyard, so it's easy for us to dump whatever we don't want into the ocean, hoping that it will just disappear by itself. Of course, as we just learned from the exchange, it's not the case. So our job really is to make sure we will handle our own conduct properly and responsibly. Now coming to the Hub, cooperatively supported by Consulate General Office of France and the HKUST, it is a very defining joint effort. We are very proud and very honored to have this long-standing platform now, which is going to be renewed immediately after this. I also like to thank Professor Pei-Yuan and the many colleagues who have been devoting their energy and effort in substance to see that the Hub will carry out the mission in dutiful and pragmatic manners. And for this, I am very proud to see that we really have, over the years, various forums, exchange programs, discussion sessions, and joint student exchange and faculty exchange efforts. So here, I'm confident to say that at HKUST, we will continue not only to support it, but we hope we can strengthen it. Now, finally, just like to add that, as you know, HKUST Guangzhou is being actively planned. And my colleague, Professor Lionel Ni, the president of HKUST Guangzhou, is sitting here in this room also. Between the two campuses in Clearwater Bay, Hong Kong, and in Guangzhou, sustainability will be HKUST systems' most important priority. And I trust that there will be many, even more opportunities for different institutions between France and HKUST to set some examples, I hope. And hence, we can truly help promote and make progress and make sense in this very, very complicated area, and hopefully to set some examples for other institutions to consider. Thank you again for the support, and we look forward to learning more from each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shi. And now let's have a look at a video that showcases the fruitful collaboration between HKUST and the French Consulate over the past few years.
Veronique, thank you also for, I think, moderating multiple times. I know that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues. And now it is a great pleasure today, building on our strong foundation, we are renewing our partnership with the extension of the HKUST France Sustainable Innovation Hub. Let me invite Consul General Mr. Giorgini and President Xi to sign the Memorandum of Understanding. Thank you very much. This marks the end of today's conference. Big thanks to all our speakers today. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all again very soon.